Happy Tuesday, everyone. It's odd that you will see me on a Tuesday, but there's something really special going on in SportsZone Chicago today. As you know, we like to do a lot of different programming on the SportsZone Chicago. We are a sports talk app. So there's podcasts, there's talk, and we're always looking to bring you new talent. And if you've been paying attention, a lot of amazing things have been happening on SportsZone Chicago. Well, here is one of our first and very signature shows. We've got What's Up Cuz with, Lancey Irvin and Jason Palmer. We've got the Smoke Fellows with Humidor Sports and Cigar Talk on Saturdays. We've got La Vida Baseball on Mondays and Wednesdays. We've got stuff all over the place. Well, this one's like a little close to my heart because we want to shake up and do something a little different that you don't necessarily find other places. So hence comes to you the debut episode of Sports 101 with Jamar Harp. Welcome to the SportsZone Chicago family, Jamar. How are you?
Welcome, everyone. Maya, thank you for having me. And as you stated, my goal is to bring from around the globe all the way to Village Road information on sports and culture, looking at it through the three Ps, which are people, places, and the perspectives that they encounter.
And that's the key thing. So what's different about this show? And Jamar's actually going to be doing, he's what I like to call our resident sports history guru. So you're about to learn that kind of stuff. If you want to seem really smart, you're at that party and everybody's dropping knowledge on some sports stuff. If you listen to Jamar, you're going to have some tidbits in the back of your pocket that nobody else knows. And they're going to say, you know what? You really know your sports. And you're going to be thinking, yeah, that's right. I know my sports. That's right. People, places, and things is what we're going to be talking about on Sports 101. So thank you to everyone for tuning in. Remember, you can always get involved in the conversation. You can post something in the comments and we will share it, right there on screen. If you got a little tidbit of knowledge, you're like, hey, Jamar, what about this? Anything you say, we're going to share on the show as well. So make sure that you get involved. More importantly, by now, hopefully everybody has taken the time to get the app. Because like I said, we're not an internet-based radio station. We're not a radio station. We are a sports talk and podcast app, which means for us, the life of everything we do streams through the app. So make sure you go to the iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon stores, look for SportsZone Chicago, and download the app. And and we make it a little bit easy for you as well. Let's just say you want to check out. We do a daily blog. So we always post what are hot and new stories. You can always go to www.blackvibes.com, SportsZone Chicago, and there's a direct app download, as well as you can hear some of the hot stories that are trending. You can listen to live shows. You can watch the live show. You can also go and listen to past shows in the podcast session, as well as watch the videos. So everything SportsZone Chicago is on the SportsZone Chicago app. So with that being said, let's get right into the business of Sports 101. What's on the table for talk today? And FYI, I'm kind of the behind the scenes person. I'm the whiz on this show. I'm the producer. So I'm only going to pop in and out here and there. I'm giving this all to Jamar to run with. It's Jamar, tell everybody what you have set up to talk about today on the show.
Well, thank you for the great intro, Maya. Today we'll be examining baseball and particularly the Negro League's impact on baseball, particularly through the Midwestern cities of Chicago and Pittsburgh. So, just to get us started, when most people think about Chicago, you talk about, what type of salad you're going to put on your hot dog, deep dish pizza, the Wind, the Bears, things like that. But no one really talks about baseball. All right. So when we look at baseball, and particularly Negro League baseball, all started in Chicago. All right. Let's go back to the early 1900s and star pitcher Rube Foster. Okay. It wasn't like today's baseball. They played 129 games, won 123 of them, and just were a shining light of the Leland Giants that played on the South Side at Southside Park. Rube became so good as a pitcher, he even tutored Major League Baseball pitchers. So in the early 1920s, he started the Chicago American Giants, one of the most historic Negro League teams of all time. Rube Foster was known for his style of play, which is now permeated into Major League Baseball. Such influence of this style of play includes stealing bases and particularly home plate, hit and run style of baseball, often known as small ball, bunting, playing your outfielder short to throw out base runners and make spectacular running catches. as well as just the jaunter and banter between the players, the competition. It was a fast-paced, flashy style of play created by Rube Foster. Um,
About Rube Foster, which is interesting. So, like you said, he's known as the father of black baseball. But Jamar, tell me something. When you say that, some people might say, well, why is people always feel black people always have something extra or different going on than what is ever mainstream, so to speak. So are you saying when you talk about the style of stealing, home, hit and run, bunting, are those things at that time what we may say would be the traditional type baseball that did not include at that point people of color, specifically African Americans? Were those not really types of styles at that time that traditional baseball was not employing?
Correct. In the major league at that time, most players just tried to hit home runs or hit the ball as hard as possible without directing it, using their hips or any type of inward out hitting style. So either you would get hard balls smashed at outfielders or hit very hard at infielders for double plays. What Rube Foster did was revolutionize the game of baseball by having players hit directionally, again, steal bases, which put pressure on pitchers to only operate from the stretch and not the wind up, and a lot of elements to put pressure on, again, the opposing defense to induce errors. So he was definitely revolutionary at his time, and this aspect was not in play in Major League Baseball. So he actually created it, and the baseball you see today is through the creation of Rube Foster.
Very interesting. And I know that we have a lot of crosstalk on different shows on What's Up Cuz with Lance and Jason. They had on Bob Kendrick, who is the president of the National Negro Baseball Museum that's in Kansas City. And they were talking about Rube Foster and how there is really within Negro League Baseball a big Chicago connection that a lot of people don't know about, especially when you even talk about the two hometown teams. Believe it or not, they're kind of woven into a little bit of that history, so to speak, correct?
Definitely. I'm glad you brought that up. In regards to the Comiskey Park and Wrigley Field rivalry, there's definitely some history behind that. So in the 1870s, the Cubs were known as the White Stockings. And at one point, they went to Ohio to play the Toledo Blue Stockings. A lot of baseball teams at that time just took the name of their stockings that they wore. The interesting part of this game was the Blue Stockings had a catcher named Moses Fleetwood Walker. So he was a very quirky catcher. He caught barehanded with no face mask. And also he was of African descent. So the White Stockings, who now known as the Cubs, had a player manager, very popular, named Adrian Cap Anderson. And at the game, once he saw Fleetwood Walker was going to play, he told his team, not to take the field. So after a few business meetings where he learned of the fines and other financial penalties would put on his team, he reluctantly decided to play. But right after that, he was one of the staunch advocates using his star ability with the White Stockings, who were, a premier team, to enact the color line in baseball. So after 1870, you didn't see a player of African descent until 1947. And that is in particularly specifically due to Adrian Cap Anson's efforts of the Chicago Cubs. So when you see people underneath the loop, or most commonly known as the South Side, or, they're diehards, Comiskey Park, South Side Park, there's a lot of factors behind that. Once South Side Park closed down, a lot of the Negro League baseball games, and particularly the All-Star games, were held in Comiskey Park on the South Side. So the White Sox and the community below the loop have always been welcoming to Negro League baseball. If you look on the field, the screen right here, you'll see a picture of South Side Park. This is where the Chicago American Giants, as well as the Chicago White Sox, played before Comiskey Field opened. So again, there's a lot of baseball history on the South Side. There is a historical meaning behind the rivalry. I'm not going to say it's on the same level as the Hatfields and the McCoys, but there is distinct duality between the White Sox and Cubs through history. And that's one thing I was fortunately able to share with you guys, and particularly the Chicago listening audience.
You know what's interesting? So, especially for people who are getting this tidbit about, the Negro League baseball, you're finding about the Cubs weren't always called the Cubs. Here, the White Stockings. That's fitting. I'm gonna take a dig. That's really fitting. Were there heels involved with those stockings? Just kidding.
I don't think so.
I'm kidding. But it's interesting because, you know what? When you think about these two baseball, teams in this town, there tends to be a mindset from a lot of people, Jamar, that the Cubs are the older, more established team, and that somehow people kind of think the White Sox are like this kind of newer expansion team. I mean, the way they kind of think of them, not realizing from a historical standpoint, they really run neck and neck in regards to their establishment. Chicago, unlike many other places, always gunnered having two baseball teams, historically. And at one point, they were probably very equally yoked, so to speak, with fan base.
Exactly. At one point, they were both called the White Stockings, actually. So the fan bases were split once again by the loop. And then as more the community diversified in regards to Afro-Latino, Latino, and African-American on one part, it changed on the other side. And the funny part about that is the city of Chicago was founded by an Afro-Frenchman named John Baptiste.
Yes.
And his home and trading post is actually at Pioneer Point right now, which is on the north side.
Right. And it actually, I want to say they erected something there to kind of say this was the point of where Jean de Sable was actually, located. So you're right. There's so much history when you talk about baseball in Chicago, especially with the Negro Leagues. And so it's kind of refreshing to be able to, one, help people to understand that at one point, I'm pretty sure the hate probably wasn't nearly as strong. But, the Cubs, and I'll be curious, since in the 1870s, they were the Chicago White Stockings. Tell me a bit, do you know when the name change came and exactly why it came along?
The name change came in the 1900s. There's not a specific reason I found in my research. I would hypothesize that it's due to, racial implications, as well as to separate themselves from the White Sox.
Because you're right, you're right. That makes sense because the names are very similar. White Sox, White Stockings, and anybody who watches baseball knows that a lot of that has to do with the actual socks that back in the day, obviously, that players used to wear, which are not. Now it's stylish if someone is showing their socks, so to speak. So yeah, that's interesting. So how Chicago has this very rich history, not with just in baseball itself, but within the Negro League. I think that's amazing.
Exactly. That style of play, that style comes from Chicago too, in regards to, Chicago's known for dressing, and as well as the migration of people from the South, in particular Mississippi. So the Negro League baseball players, and particularly the ones in Chicago, will pull their pants up and show their socks or stockings. And that was, the way they wore their uniforms versus other teams that, their pants legs would be all the way down.
Interesting. So that's another thing that kind of originated from the Negro League, so to speak, was kind of this style,
style and the way they wore their uniforms.
Would you say that a part of that, Jamar, comes from the fact of we already talked about the style of play, and it's funny because now in Major League Baseball, you hear kind of conversations about small ball and obviously long ball. And small ball kind of incorporates some of those pieces that we talked about, like bunting and, hit and run and stealing bases and things like that. Whereas we know that obviously long ball is about having people in the lineup that can go yard. Bottom line, those power hitters are layering your lineup, so to speak. But it's interesting because there's no real mention that those are things that really came from the Negro League, because for a long time, the Negro League was kind of just put underground after it dissolved. After I think a lot of integration happened and players started moving over to traditional baseball, a lot of the things that were interesting and stylish, even like in names and uniforms with the Negro League, seemed like it kind of faded away to the background.
Definitely, I would concur with those sentiments exactly. If you look at prior to 1947 and Jackie Robinson's assimilation into Major League Baseball, The Negro League not only had two professional leagues, they had a number of teams that barnstormed. This type of barnstorming was categorized in the movie Bingo Long and the Traveling All-Stars, where the players that weren't with a team that year would just get up and drive to different cities and play the local farm boys or whoever from the community. Negro League Baseball also provided the opportunity of employment. Besides baseball players, you had owners, coaches, groundskeepers, statisticians, equipment men, all of African descent, and a lot of these people lost jobs once the assimilation in Major League Baseball came. So it was a holistic destruction of a piece of culture. A lot of the fields were tore down. Some of the first night games were played with Negro League teams, which was revolutionary for all baseball at that time. So it really hurt the community once the Negro League folded in 1947.
And that's a great interview. You guys should capture that. Is on the SportsZone Chicago app. Was with Bob Kendrick, who was on What's Up Cuz with Lance and Jason about 2 weeks ago. And he is the president of the Negro League Baseball Museum that's in Kansas City, which I will tell everybody, you really should check it out. It's a great piece of history. If you are a baseball enthusiast, I think no matter who you are, what walk of life, what race, gender, I think you will enjoy the experience that they have there. They were going to do like a virtual traveling museum, but because of COVID-19, because of the anniversary they were handing, that was kind of tabled and they weren't able to do it. But that's one of the things that Bob Kendrick talked about, Jamar, that I thought was really interesting, is that the Negro Leagues wasn't just about baseball. It wasn't about the fact that minority players, specifically African Americans, were not allowed to participate in traditional baseball, a game that they also loved, but the opportunity that it created for the community in regard to the jobs and the resources that were there. And when he touched on that, what was interesting is I never once thought for a moment like, oh, these teams were primarily owned by other Black people, which means, like you said, all those jobs were held by other Black people. So a lot of things were phased out when the league itself was absorbed into Major League Baseball.
Exactly. There was even some women owners. There were some women owners of European as well as African descent. There was a lot of diversity in Negro League Baseball. One thing that people fail to realize is most often these teams, when they competed against Major League teams, they would win, either as their individual team or the all-star team. Going into our, as a foreshadowing for our next segment, the Homestead Grays, one of the greatest teams of all time, at one point started 5 Hall of Famers. Out of 11 position players, they had 5 Hall of Famers. So again, not only the excitement, but the economic impact in these communities was sorely missed once the baseball departed.
And that's the part that's so interesting about the fact that it's good that this history was able to be preserved, because of so much you're finding out about the style of play that you see so many players of color utilize now, whether it be from people from the Black community or people coming from the West Indies or the Caribbean. It's interesting because another layer of that history that I found out years ago when I was kind of doing some research myself was that a lot of African American players, when they were not playing in the Negro Leagues here in the US, would travel down and play either in the Caribbean League and or they would go up north and they would play in the Canadian League to kind of continue their play and kind of keep going with the movement, so to speak.
Well, not only that they do that, but it was economic and they could play baseball in the winter, but it was a different style of life. Oftentimes these Negro League players, when they came in contact with Major League players, they had to, do as the times dictated, go through back doors, couldn't eat with their teams, had to stay in certain places. So it was kind of refreshing to go to Puerto Rico or any Hispanic country that has a strong African presence due to the capable of demarcation and the transportation of Africans through the transatlantic slave trade that stopped at all the islands in the before arriving in the United States. So there's a strong history of baseball throughout all those islands, and they were able not only to enjoy that, but some culture as well, and some freedom for not feeling as so persecuted during the 1920s through 40s in the United States.
Yes, and that's the part that I think is interesting. It's just kind of like seeing you're seeing a reversal of Americans going down to play in the West Indies and Caribbeans, and now you're seeing obviously a huge influx into Major League Baseball of West Indian, South American, Central, all kinds of people, especially obviously of Hispanic and Latino descent. And we kind of had a little conversation about this.
Exactly.
And people were like, and I said, that there's the argument, and I kind of split the line on this a little bit. There's that argument, Jamar. And by the way, you're tuned into Sports 101 with Jamar Harp. This is Jamar. I'm just kind of filling in to get people comfortable and get used to the new show that's really about sports history from a people, places, and things perspective. It's not about X's and O. It's giving you great history about different sports. And the key thing is when you tune in, you're going to walk away with those nuggets. And somewhere you're going to be able to drop this information and someone's going to be like, really? Or you just might be playing some trivia game and they'll be like, what was the first baseball stadium that was made out of steel? And you're going to know the answer. And it's going to be crazy. So that's a good thing about this show is departing from, traditional sports talk and kind of giving you more history to the games that we've come to love. So one of the things that Jamar and I talked about is that, there's that conversation about how there's so few African Americans in baseball. And you might start to see a resurgence. I kind of feel like you may see that a momentum shift. And seeing more young individuals, young men playing baseball. But there's that conversation about some people feel, well, no, there are still Black people in baseball because if you know anything about the Caribbean or West Indies, which was part of the slave trade, there's a reason why you see someone named like Ray Lopez who looks like me or you. You know what I mean? Because they were part of the slave trade. So some people still believe that, well, no, there are Black, individuals still playing the game. It's different. What's your thoughts on that historically in regards to that shift of, the Negro League clearly was Black people playing baseball versus you see less of that now?
Well, in regards to African Americans, there is a decline. Baseball was America's pastime for all, citizens. I think all the way up to the 1940s. Even looking in literature, if you look at the famous playwright August Wilson, and his play Fences is basically revolving around, baseball and was shot or depicted out of Homestead, Pennsylvania. Pittsburgh being my hometown, I'm real familiar with that, and as well as the baseball in that city. So after the Presidents left the Negro Leagues, the Brooklyn Dodgers, they decided to look outside of America. So they set up training academies in the Dominican Republic, as well as other, Hispanic countries. After Jackie Robinson, you start to see Roberto Clemente, other Afro Hispanic players. And that was basically due to the Brooklyn Dodgers and their saturation of baseball field in the Dominican Republic in the early 50s and 60s. So when you saw the influx of players in the late 70s, 80s, and 90s, that was due to 20 years of building within those islands.
Very, very interesting that a New York team, which interesting, I'd be curious if that influence with the Brooklyn Dodgers, which we know now is obviously LA. Mm-hmm. When we look at New York City, we know that it has one of the largest population of Latino individuals. We know that. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if that had any influence, and either was there a presence at that time, or did that kind of sort of start to drive a presence with people migrating more so to New York City? Because that's interesting, but it would make sense to me if it would have been a New York City, or state of New York City, or a California. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's kind of doing that, but I could see a New York team being progressive and being the first to take that step because of what their population looks like now.
Well, a lot of the times these players weren't implemented until the Dodgers went to LA. But if you look at Manny Ramirez and a lot of the great Hispanic or Afro-Hispanic players that came out of New York, a lot of them ended up in New York from the islands due to the industrial nature of the city. So similar to how Europeans from Eastern Europe came to Pittsburgh and worked in the factories, people from all walks of life moved to New York to get in that industrial, and then they also formed certain pockets. So if you go to the South Bronx, you'll see a lot of Afro-Hispanics. My first time in the South Bronx, I was coming down Sedgwick right off of 87, and I went to a diner to get, a pizza and a center breast chicken, and there was a gentleman there. He was darker than me and, fluent in Spanish. So, that was, kind of my education in regards to the Afro-Hispanic culture.
Okay, there you go. And that's where the Afro-Hispanic culture still is very predominant in baseball. And you made a point when you were on Sean and Maya in the morning, which, by the way, comes on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 9 to noon. A little shameless plug of another SportsZone Chicago show.
Come in, great show, great show.
So I'm going to plug a little bit of everybody in here. But, you've made some really interesting points that most people don't think about, is that what I didn't realize is a lot of HBCUs have fantastic baseball programs. Yeah. That's probably where, there's probably far more Black players there than we think about, because it doesn't seem like we see them on that pro level. But you also said that quite a few of them, especially in Florida, recruit heavily within the Latino community as well. So you're kind of seeing quite a few of the HBCUs doing recruiting within those communities.
Exactly. You look at the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference, and the Southwestern Athletic Conference. Those are the two premier Division I conferences that host historically Black colleges and universities. Bethune-Cookman and FAMU have had a proverbial stranglehold on a MEAC title due to their proximity to Florida and the influx of Latin Americans. And they flock to Little Haiti, Little Cuba, neighborhoods like that where they still have a cultural influence, and they are, in love and infatuated with the game of baseball. Now that both of these institutions have moved to the Southwestern Athletic Conference, I just see a lot more competition within baseball in that conference. Southern University, Grambling, some other schools were tops in that in the SWAC. The Uptons played at BJ and Justin played at Southern University.
Yes, they did.
So there's a rich hit. Andre Dawson is another SWAC legend. So there's a lot of rich tradition of baseball in the Southwestern and MEAC athletic conferences.
Yes, and that's interesting. I'll be curious, to see how this kind of begins to matriculate up. If you'll see more of these schools kind of get off into those baseball World Series, like College World Series and things like that, just because of the level of talent that they're ever to recruit. So probably despite what we think, there are probably still quite a bit of African Americans still playing baseball, but just for some reason, we're not necessarily seeing them in the MLB level. But I have the sinking suspicion that is going to change.
Definitely. Our next guest is going to speak on that. He has experience as a college coach as well as a scout in Major League Baseball for the Florida Marlins. Currently, he's a scout with the Washington Nationals, and he can give insight on to what these teams are looking for and how we can get more of our talented athletes to get out the paradigm of just playing football and basketball and look at non-traditional sports that are actually traditional in our community, such as baseball and soccer.
All right. Well, I'm looking forward to our next guest. I guess we can go ahead. I know he is back in the studio getting prepared. So we'll go ahead and take a quick break. We're going to share a PSA that we've been sharing across SportsZone Chicago, which is one from One Chicago. So we'll take a quick break, a couple minutes. We'll be back with our next guest, which I think his insight from the college and even the pro scouting side should be very interesting. Jamar Harp and Maya Akai is about to move to the background, starting with this interview. Everybody sit tight. Sports 101 with Jamar Harp. We'll be right back after this break.
See me. See me.
See me. See my dark skin and my kinky hair.
See me. Don't see past me.
Don't see through me.
See me.
See my tan skin and my curly hair.
See me.
Don't see past me.
Don't see through me.
See me.
See my face, wet with tears from years of oppression.
See my hands, weathered and worn from decades of pulling myself up through your society.
See my feet split from centuries of walking your delicate line.
See me.
See me.
See me.
I'm tired.
I'm tired.
I'm tired.
Greetings, and thank you for coming back to Sports 101, our comprehensive look at sports through the lens of culture. Our next guest coming to our panel is a baseball lifer. He has worked not only in college ball, but again, scouted for the Florida Marlins, and now currently works for the Washington Nationals. Starting at his career at Jackson State University, he moved on to Payne College as a head coach in 1999 and 2000. There he was able to win the SIAC Conference Championship and was also named Coach of the Year. Deciding to move his talents to another conference school, he repeated the same feat at Albany State in 01 and 02, winning 2 back-to-back SIAC championships and 2 Coaches of the Year. After scouting with the Florida Marlins, he is now currently a scout with the Washington Nationals and associate athletic director and head baseball coach at Rusk College, the second oldest historically black college in America. Ladies and gentlemen, Sports 101 and SportsZone Chicago guest, I would like to welcome Stanley Stubbs.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Coach Stubbs. Everyone, I met Coach Stubbs years ago through a mutual friend that has us linked soul to soul. We met while I was coaching at Payne College, and I learned to Coach Stubbs, and I just wanted to share some of his experiences with you guys. So, Coach Stubbs, can you tell the audience a little bit about your introduction into baseball, and particularly in the college ranks?
Yes, it was. I was fortunate enough to, once I finished playing college football and baseball at Lane College, I knew I wanted to go to Jackson State University. I wanted to go undergrad, but my grades didn't allow me to do it. And so I just persevered and just waited till I finished my undergraduate degree. And then I enrolled in Jackson State University in the graduate program. And that is where I met the Hall of Fame baseball coach, SWAC legend, Coach Robert Bob Brady, who gave me an opportunity to learn under his tutelage and to coaching his program and to be a part of his program. And we were just fortunate enough. My first year, we won in 1995. We won the SWAC championship and had an opportunity to go to the NCAA play-in at the time against Middle Tennessee State University. So I worked under Bob for 4 years, and that was a very valuable experience that I had working under him and learning from him. And you didn't mention that I was scouting with the Atlanta Braves as well. In 1997, I met a guy by the name of Robert Lucas, who was a SWAC legend at the time, at standout baseball player at Florida A&M University. And he coached the likes of Vince Coleman and Marquise Grissom. And his brother, Bill Lucas, was an executive, front office exec for the Atlanta Braves. So Lucas took me on his wings and just taught me how to become a scout and how to grade players, and that was very, very valuable for me at the time. And then once I decided to leave Jackson State, a head baseball job opened up at Payne College, and I was fortunate enough to get the job at Payne College. And the second year in the program, we were 28-7, ranked number 6 in the South Region Division. We had a pretty good team, pretty good guys coming in, and all of a sudden, that didn't work out at Payne. So Albany State come calling, and I accepted the position and ended up winning back-to-back championships at Albany State as well. Also, the team that I had, they were pretty good and pretty competitive. We just had a well-rounded team. We was also ranked number 7 in the South region. So just fortunate and blessed to be in the right position, the right place at the right time. And then I left Albany State because of contractual issues, and just felt like I wasn't getting the respect that I deserved, because I didn't graduate from Albany State. I just felt like they catered more to Albany State people, so I kind of felt like an outsider. So I accepted the job as an associate scout with the Florida Marlins when I left the Braves, and then I got a job at Benedict College, worked for the Marlins in Benedict College for a year, and then I ventured out and started my own indoor training facility. Well, I was working with another guy that owned the indoor training facility, and then when he left, I took the facility over and ran it.
So, Coach Stubbs, real quick,
So,
apologize for cutting you off, but you talked about your experiences with the Braves, the Marlins, and the Nationals. Can you tell us a little bit about Major League Scouting and how they approach historically Black college baseball and the limitations or delimitations of scouting students from that segment?
Well, I mean, it's to be able to catch a scout's eye from a Black college perspective, you've got to be a well-rounded athlete. You've got to have the grades, because they're going to look at your makeup. They're going to look at your sixth sense, so to speak, see if you got the mental aspect or the mental approach to be able to play the game at a high level. Of course, you got to have a good skill set. You got to be able to run. You got to be able to hit. You got to be able to throw. You got to be able to hit for power, hit for average. All of those things are going to play in Major League Baseball. And what we have to do from a Black college standpoint is that we got to make sure that we fully prepare our players for the next level, because you got to look at it. It ain't many Black baseball players in baseball, in Major League Baseball. So not realistic. But now you've got to have a skill set. You can do it. A person can do it, but they have to fully apply themselves, and they have to be well-rounded, man. They can't have any flaws in their game, in their abilities. So you really have to be, sum it all up in a nutshell. You got to be pretty much well-rounded.
So is there any tools or tricks that you can share on how to create this 5-tool player? Is it recruiting, DBs on the football team?
Say that one more time. I'm sorry.
Team?
I couldn't hear you. I'm sorry.
I said, is there any tools or strategies to develop this 5-tool baseball player? Should baseball coaches start looking on the football team for defensive backs or receivers, or the basketball team for shooting guards to try to assimilate into baseball?
Man, that's a tough question. Like I said earlier, I hope I answered your question right. Is that you got to be a special type player for the catch the scout's eye. For example, look at Ricky Weeks. No one never thought that Ricky Weeks would do what he did when he was at Southern. No one never thought a Dave Clark would do what he did at Jackson State. But, they put in a lot of work. They put a lot of time in, put a lot of effort. They put themselves in the right position to be successful. And that's what our student athletes has to do with the Black college side, is that they got to put themselves in the right position they've got to be, like I said earlier, they got to be well-rounded to put themselves in that position to play at the next level.
Hi, Stanley. I'm Maya Kai. I am the producer for Jamar's show, as well as the co-founder of SportsZone Chicago. Thank you for coming on. We appreciate you.
Thank you, man.
There you go. There's your face. I kept seeing your ear. Wait, there you go. I was like, does he want us to whisper in his ear or something? Because I'm like, he keeps showing me his ear for some reason. All right, there you go. There's the face. Okay. Question for you. So, from a program standpoint, are there certain HBCUs, would you say, that one are baseball schools? And if you're a scout, you feel like if there's a quality player coming out, it's going to be this school that I'm going to look at that probably has the resources, the program is developed. They're going to probably get the top tier Black athletes to play. Are there schools like that you would say are Black baseball colleges?
Yes, I can. Number one, it's going to be Jackson State University, Southern Baton Rouge University in Baton Rouge, Alabama State University, Grambling State University, Bethune-Cookman College. I would also say Savannah State University, man, because I worked at Savannah State a couple of years, and Coach Hardy has done a fantastic job down there and preparing these guys for the next level. So those are the schools that scouts.
I think we lost him.
I think we might have lost him. So we'll let him come. We'll let him, because sometimes you're driving. I'll be able to see if he can kind of get it back together as he's coming through. That was Stanley Stubbs, Associate Athletic Director, Head of Baseball at Russ College, as well as an Associate Scout with the Washington Nationals. And we were talking to him a bit about, when you talk about, scouting out players just in general, obviously, what are the things that are going to be able to separate, Black players out? And to me, my first thought was, Jamar, is that there's probably those schools, you know what I'm saying, that you'd have to have the program in place. The resources are there, the coaching is there, like for instance, how there's the Alabamas in football, you know what I mean? Exactly. There's a Duke in basketball, there has to be those historically Black colleges and universities that would be at least the top tier. There we go. We got him back. All right. Wait, he's adjusting his camera, so we won't be talking to his ear.
Yeah, well, all those schools, Coach Stubbs stated, they have two basic components. They have culture and facilities, where they can nurture these players 24/7, batting cages, instructional coaches, as well as the opportunity to put that bat on that ball on a consistent basis.
And that's the key. So the name is interesting. All the schools that you named, and welcome back, Stanley, are actually schools that I have heard people mention as being the Black schools that have the good programs. Right. So it's interesting, and I would never say that I'm at least that well versed to know what those schools are, but those are the schools that have come up in the conversation that I've heard people talk about recruiting and where players will go.
Right. Yeah, those schools are at the forefront. I mean, the coaches and administration has done an outstanding job at giving them the resources for their programs to be very, very successful. And without the help from the administration, they wouldn't be where they are today. So, I mean, they've had a lot of help, and those guys work hard, and I have a lot of admiration and respect for all of them.
Let me ask you a question in being a scout. Baseball is my favorite sport.
All right.
Watched it as a kid. I was at once upon a time the only girl on my team, and I was actually damn good. Boys didn't like it, but I was good. What's interesting to me when I look at, there has to be an eye, because if you think about the amount of players that are recruited just in the minors and farm systems, I'm thinking in my mind, probably only 2 to 3% of them really matriculate up to the MLB level, so to speak. Right. So when you're scouting, what specifically is it that you're looking for where you're like, this kid has it? Like, this is, because it's hard to know if someone in college can play at that level at the pro. We've seen a lot of people just not cut it that were phenomenal college players.
Right. Well, you got to have good makeup. We always like to look at the makeup, and we also are taught to compare him to a current major league player. Who does he hit like? Does he hit like Corey Seager? Is he a Clayton Kershaw type guy, or is he a Mookie Betts? So we have to compare the college guys to the pro guys, and then we just look at their skill set and see how they handle the bat. If he can handle the bat, see how well they run. See, all of that stuff is going to play in pro baseball, and so you really have to have those particular skill sets, and you got to be able to be comparable to somebody that's playing in the big leagues right now.
Coach Stubbs, thank you so much for that. Our last question would be, or statement, if you could just briefly divulge into your current position now as Associate Athletic Director and Head Baseball Coach at Rush College. Please take this time to pub your program, attract students as well as student athletes, and let this light shine on Rush College and Rush College athletics.
Yes. I am currently the Associate Director of Athletics. I'm a goal-oriented person. I've always said that I wanted to be an athletic director once my coaching career winds down. God has been really blessed me to be in the position that I am currently in right now. I've always told Coach Brady that I've always wanted to follow in his footsteps, and he was a long-time head baseball coach at Jackson State, and he eventually became the athletic director. So I'm following that same pattern. Russ College baseball program has been down for several years, and since I came on board, we wanted to try to upgrade our facilities to be more competitive. Edward Waters College, schools like that. So we're in the process of trying to revitalize our athletic facility, our baseball facility, and that once we do that, I think that will allow us to attract those top tier student athletes that I see on a daily basis. But when you don't have the facility, it's kind of hard to recruit them kind of players. But now I've been fortunate to partner with a guy out of Chicago. He was a former first-round draft choice to the Houston Astros. I think he went to Simeon, Sean Lipsy. So he and I has partnered up, and he runs a baseball academy in Atlanta, and he sends me all of his players. He just recently sent me Evander Holyfield's nephew, Maury Weaver, and signed a guy out of Griffin, Georgia, by the name of D. Champion and Draylon Holmes. So we're very, very excited about the players that we're bringing in this year to kind of help us get over that hump.
Well, thank you so much, Coach Stubbs. Thank you for your time. Friendship is truly central to the soul. I wish you well and in all your future opportunities. And I look forward to having you back on. And again, Chicago, let's send some students to Rush College. Let's send some baseball players to Rush College. Let's get the enrollment up. All right, you can contact Coach Stubbs at Stanley Stubbs on Twitter for any information on baseball Rush College.
Yes, sir. Now, thank you guys for having me. I apologize for traveling, but I got to go find an interview, a pitching coach. So I'm on the road trying to find that person to be my pitching coach. So I apologize again, but thanks for having me, guys.
No problem. Thank you for your time, dog. Rudy Roo. And again, best wishes.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
All right.
All right.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, we just went over our Chicago portion of the show. Now we have to move to the next baseball hotbed. Now, this place, again, is near and dear to my heart. It's in between the confluence of the Monongahela and Allegheny Rivers. Most people know this town as Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And, they also had a great foundation in baseball as well. First, we'll start off talking about the Homestead Grays, okay, and Cumberland Posey. Now, Cumberland Posey's family, they come from a wealthy upbringing. He actually graduated with a pharmacy degree from Pitt in 1915. Interesting fact about him, he played basketball at Duquesne after he graduated from Pitt under a different name. Here's a picture of Cumberland Posey. He took a lot of the youth from the Homestead area and formed a team called the Homestead Grays. Now, again, due to his family stature, Cumberland Posey Sr. did a lot of business with Frick and Carnegie, a lot of those guys at that time. He was very light. Some would say he could pass, but Cumberland Posey used his wealth to start a baseball team. All right. So from the 1920s all up into the 1940s, the Homestead Grays were kind of the upper echelon in that area. They got a rival in regards to the Pittsburgh Crawfords in the 30s, and they used to always go back and forth with players. Their manager, his name is Gus Greenlee. Ironically, he hails from my mom's hometown of Marion, North Carolina. Shout out McDowell County. He left there in 1916 in a boxcar and traveled to Pittsburgh, where due to his nature, his ethnic makeup, he was a little Italian, a little Irish, a little African American. So he settled on the Hill District and opened up a famous tavern called Crawford Bar and Grill on Crawford on the HI. Rest in peace, Ike. Using his fame and also his business dealings, he was a community philanthropist. So he would give money away from his numbers rackets and also his racketeering operations to the people in the community, and also started a baseball team to rival Cumberland Posey's Homestead Grays. So the Pittsburgh Crawfords, they played primarily on the Hill District. Another fun Pittsburgh fact is he was the first gentleman of African American descent to own a baseball stadium. He built it, and they played out of it. The Steelers actually used to practice there. It was on Bedford, up past Ammons, Macedonia, all that towards the towards the top. It's actually where Bedford Dwellings is right now. In regards to starting this team, most people think of Fifth Avenue or Shenley as the top high schools and on the Hill District. But before those two, you had McKelvey and Watt High. So they used to battle all the time in baseball. So what Greenlee did is he took a culmination of both of those teams and made the Pittsburgh Crawfords. He then began to buy players from the Homestead Grays. So the great Josh Gibson, the greatest baseball player of all time, who I grew up actually with his great grandson, Sean. He was in a rental office court, and he used to have a lot of trophies going up the stairwell. And I said, I'm gonna give me a lot of trophies one day like Sean. I don't think I got that much, but Sean, I was close to you. Here's a picture of Josh Gibson right here. He was an all-star catcher for both the Crawfords and the Grays, Major League Baseball Hall of Famer, Pittsburgh legend and icon. Again, Sean Gibson runs the Josh Gibson Foundation right now, which is instrumental in instrumenting the involvement of African Americans in baseball, not only in Pittsburgh, but on a national level. The Josh Gibson Foundation has allowed teams to play in major league stadiums. In particularly North Carolina Central University had a game, and they play within the confines of the Green Monster. So again, the Josh Gibson Foundation is big, and his legacy still lives on. So again, after Gus Greenlee, he did this. All this happened after Rube Foster died in 1930. So one of his other main accomplishments was starting the East-West All-Star Game. Unlike most All-Star games, this was a Negro League All-Star Game, and was played at the end of the year. The other thing about it was, since the Crawfords or sometimes the Grays were barnstormed, they won't be independents. They will be independents and not in the league. They will have the two main newspapers at that time, the Chicago Defender and the Pittsburgh Courier, select black baseball players. The Pittsburgh Courier was responsible for the East team, and the Chicago Defender was the West team. I think the 1938 East-West All-Star Game, general admission ticket was $2, and you got to see a team of baseball stars that rivaled anything that Major League Baseball put out. Again, a lot of these players played in the major leagues, but they were after their prime. Satchel Paige played after Jackie Robinson assimilated, but he was in his mid-40s, and various others. So again, just tipping my hat to the Midwest and the involvement of Chicago and Pittsburgh in Black college baseball. Our next guest will have, he is an assistant baseball coach, one of my former classmates at Grambling State University. He is a coach at one of these baseball powers that Coach Stubbs talked about, that has not only culture, tradition, and facilities to enhance the game of baseball in the African American community. So we're going to wait for him for a few seconds. Please excuse us for this quick commercial break, and we'll see you back. And hopefully Dalvin will be here so we can talk.
Hey, Jamar, before we go a break, really quickly, one of the things I wanted to talk about that Stanley mentioned, it was interesting to hear that perspective about being a scout, and looking at everybody in its totality. And then obviously with himself working in the inner workings of HBCUs and coaching. And the common thread you hear consistently, and this is something I want to put on the table, because for all the philanthropic things that people want to do to help, what I think would be really important at this time, he talked about a lack of facilities. Having those facilities for players to train, to be competitive with the likes of bigger programs, so to speak. With your experience in working through HBCUs, is that one of the bigger disparities in having the facilities, not necessarily the talent and not even good coaches, but is the resource one of the biggest things that needs to take a huge turn if we talk about wanting HBCUs to really be competitive, just not in baseball, but basketball, football, and so forth?
Exactly. Facilities is imperative. In regards to football, we just took that as example because that's, a major sport now. If you look at the state of Louisiana, before 1980, most of the NFL Hall of Famers and NFL players went to Grambling State. After 1980, majority of them went to LSU. At the same time, Louisiana State and other schools were able to upgrade their facilities with television money that they didn't have previously. And you start to see that shift in between the top athletes deciding to go to HBCUs and attend predominantly white institutions. So in baseball, it's the same song. A lot of the schools that are known as baseball factories, especially those schools Coach Stubbs mentioned in the SWAC, have batting cages, they have instructors. If you look at him, his school is an NAIA school, but yet he's driving to find a position coach to help his pitchers, which is, vital because, pitching is the name of the game. So with support, hopefully some listeners or someone will take interest in Major League Baseball, United States Baseball, any other league that wants to produce homegrown talent, will funnel some money into these historically black colleges and universities, and other major sports will follow. So that way it'll be somewhat of an even playing field, and you won't see that grave dynamic of a lot of African-American players on the field and not in the stands or not on the sideline coaching.
Absolutely. And, one of the things that we talk about is the fact that these resources that right now, because of the social movement we're seeing with apparently this awakening that Black Lives Matter, though we've had this conversation for like how long now, but all of a sudden, I guess everybody in the country got the memo. And it's interesting because you have a lot of young 4- and 5-star, prospects in different sports deciding to sign on to HBCUs, which, people are kind of like split on this. They feel like, okay, you get enough of them to do it, and part of where you can generate the revenue that's needed to build out those facilities that can make them competitive would be obviously TV revenue dollars. So if your top tier talents are going to these schools, then guess what? The money will follow. The question is, can there be that kind of perseverance to have that happen? And what you've seen right now in the trends with some of the HBCUs, do you think that's something that if people stick to their guns and what their objective is, if we see more top recruits going to black schools in any sport, do you really believe the shift can happen with the money following?
Definitely, because the money is based off of television contracts now, and television wants to provide the best entertainment possible. So whether that's at a black college or a predominantly white institution, whatever school is producing the best talent will be on television. Take, for instance, if we look at college basketball, if this dream situation happens, and it's not going to be a dream to this head coach because he's an innovator in industry, Coach LaVelle Moton at North Carolina Central University, if he lands Mikey Williams and Bronny James, that'll be tremendous in regards to the basketball world, not only for HBCUs, but all basketball in general. That's two potential top five players playing at the same time with a lot of already internet cachet that the school could cash in and monetize.
And, you know, it's interesting. This is Sports 101 with Jamar Harp, where we talk about the people, places, and things in sports, not necessarily the X's and O's. And if something can be learned is that how the Negro League was lost and all the opportunity that went with it. HBCUs equally suffered with the idea of integration and traditional schools going to recruit and being able to offer more. And we may be sitting at that juncture, Jamar, where we can see a shift where revenue can come back to these schools, interesting enough. And one thing we won't get into necessarily here, because we do have an HBCU show, by the way, folks, that's on tap. We're seeing even the HBCUs maybe beginning to realize there's power in numbers. And we're seeing some of the conferences look a little different as well.
Exactly. If you look at the Big South Conference, they just poached two members of the MEAC in regards to taking down the quality of play in the MEAC right now. Hopefully that's going to be resolved with the addition of some new teams and the evolution of the SWAC, more commonly known as the SWAC, into a power conference. That's going to be highly competitive, not only in traditional sports such as football and basketball, but you have innovative athletic directors such as Jennifer Thomas at Alabama State, who's also, a former athlete, and a woman athletic director. Shout out to JT Hoop who's doing great things down there. But you'll have women's soccer, baseball, softball. The competition in this conference is going to just continue to grow. So hopefully one of those teams can go far in the NCAA tournament, regardless of their sport.
Okay, well, every day is history in the making. So there's something to be said and something to be learned, obviously, about the shift that we're currently seeing. So we'll see if this can matriculate and give more resources to the likes of Stanley, Stubbs, who's looking to build a program for Russ College as well. All right, let's go ahead and take a break, and hopefully we'll come back with our next guest, which talk about coming from a historical HBCU. I'm sure many people who are in the Chicagoland area are not a stranger to this particular school, but we'll chat a bit more about him and get his insight into kind of what we see in trends, obviously, in baseball as well. Everybody, you're tuned into Sports 101 with Jamar Harp, and I'm just tagging along as a producer, so to speak. All right, guys, we're going to take a break, and we'll be right back. All right, everybody, welcome back to Sports 101 with Jamar Harp, where it's the show that talks about sports from a history perspective. Jamar is our, as I call him, sports history guru. And if you stick around and you check out enough of his shows, you will be the most popular person at any party just dropping knowledge about sports. You'll know stuff that people are like, why do you know that? No, just, I'm a sports person. They'll think you're absolutely brilliant. So, Jamar, welcome aboard to the SportsZone Chicago family. And this is the first show.
Thank you.
So definitely love having you on board, talking, if you missed the first half of the show, about Chicago, about the Negro Leagues in Chicago, which most people don't know that Chicago is firmly rooted in the history, so to speak. And then you gave us a little East Coast, kind of talked a little Pittsburgh and that background, which I didn't realize how much was going on there as well. So the first half of the show was fantastic.
Thank you.
So we're waiting for another guest to chime in, hopefully, that we can, kind of chat with him about in regards to also working at a HBCU and baseball. As we know, we're seeing a lot of, trends. Ed Howard kind of piqued a lot of people's interest. As a White Sox fan, it was unfortunate to see him be in our program, as a youth, and then to not recruit him, so to speak. And he goes to the north side, so he's still in Chicago, just on the wrong side of town. That's all. But I really feel like there is really a shift of a lot of young African-American youth kind of coming back to baseball. We saw the popularity with, the Jackie Robinson team a couple of seasons ago. Didn't go the way we'd have liked for it to have gone. But I think it began to re-peak that interest. And there are so many people that legitimately are invested in getting more African-Americans involved in baseball again.
Definitely. If you look at the success of that team from Philadelphia, their star player, Monet Davis, is a softball player at Hampton University now.
Mm-hmm.
So oftentimes in today's age, it's just technology, society. So if these kids are introduced to baseball at a young age and they're introduced to a style of play conducive to them culturally wise, I think it'll permeate more in the community and you'll see more participation.
What's interesting about Monet Davis is that there was really a thought that she was going to go to UConn and play basketball because, she kind of had alluded to that a bit, that she was interested in playing at UConn. And then actually a lot of people kind of got in their feelings about that because they felt like, well, that's making a commitment to a school. Mind you, she was still, I think, in grammar school, like in junior high or something.
No
she made a comment and people felt like UConn somehow was recruiting her. I doubt that was it. There were quite a few young girls that want to play for the likes of UConn and schools like that in Tennessee because they have those established programs. So she was just following what her passion was for a school. But a lot of people took exception to that and felt that was illegal recruiting. And it actually got looked into. I'm like, really? Yeah. She just expressed that she's a passion to play for a school, but people don't want to lose out on good stuff. So yeah, she chose Hampton and she chose softball, which I thought was an interesting choice considering, to be honest, not sure how good Hampton is in softball.
Yeah.
And I'm not even sure how good she was in basketball. So hence maybe that was the right choice for her. I don't know.
Well, she was always a multi-sport athlete in the Philadelphia area. And she actually played obviously baseball, growing up, and I can't really speak too much on her decision to attend Hampton and not play basketball at UConn. I read one article in particular, and she referenced just, starting afresh, making a name for herself, and doing something different. So I'm not sure if she's going to play basketball at Hampton or just stay strictly to softball, but I do appreciate her choice of school, and I hope more top athletes, will follow. So we get Mikey Williams not only in basketball, but we get some in football, we get some in women's softball, we get some in baseball, and the rest of the sports that are hosted by these historic Black colleges and universities.
Well, like I said, it's right down the middle of people not knowing how they feel necessarily about it this time. The shift you're seeing with a lot of top recruits deciding to attend HBCUs. Some people feel it's more of a fad. They don't think it's going to go the distance, so to speak. Some people feel like, no, it's just the first step in a long journey of a choice. Though I will tell you, I do believe the biggest issue that's going to probably maybe be an obstacle is that resource, facilities, things of that nature. And we talked about, obviously the likes of, top stars going to these schools can generate the revenue. But I'm not going to be flat out and honest. I'm going to say, here's one thing we're good about at SportsZone Chicago, that we don't mince our words about it, because, as a sports talk and podcast app, we're not pigeonholed by anybody. So we can speak our minds here. And I think that part's important. I need for just some people to throw some money at HBCUs.
Definitely.
I'm just gonna say it. There are a lot of celebrities out there that have donated money to traditional schools who didn't even need that kind of money. So if we want to be in the midst of the movement, for me, what I think is important it is to protest, to take down statues, Jamar. I also feel like you need to put your money where your mouth is. You know what I'm saying? I feel like we need to reinvest in our communities so that we can change what is the systemic racism that exists, because now we have everyone's attention. So how about we start saying, hey, you know something, donor over there, would you be interested in sponsoring X amount of dollars and sending it over to this school? Because we want to rebuild our historically black colleges and universities, because these are places where we educate and our history is here.
Definitely. If you look at the main tenet of racism is, from my perspective, is based off of economics. So once you skew that economic curve, and it tends to go back to where you can spend money within your own demographic and it circulate multiple times before it leaves the community, then you have a structural base set up that you can develop not only infrastructure in athletics, but in education and hopefully in politics as well.
And that's what's really key. Part of what I feel like is missing on a daily basis in what I see is I feel like the opportunity is slipping away to start to educate people about how change can happen. And you're right, it's an economic base. It's about economic disparity. And sports has always reflected what's happening socially. So, you know, literally, if you look at a timeline of sports and you look at what was going on in this country, you can literally see how it emulated, whether we're talking about the fact that there were the Negro Leagues because blacks could not play in traditional baseball. Whether we're talking about Olympics because we're in segregation and John Carlo raises the fist. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. History has always mirrored, sports has always mirrored what is happening socially and culturally in our country, at least, and probably in others. So if we're taking a page out of this and we finally have everyone's attention about the disparities that exist historically within sports, sports has become a platform to be a voice. I would say, can we take it a step further and let's not just have conversations about what's wrong in this country. Let's put together an action plan how to make change. I don't care how many signs you hold up, Jamar. It doesn't change that people still live in poverty. It doesn't, you know, those things don't change. What will change is when we economically make a shift and all children have a right to go to a school where they get a quality education. You know what I mean? Exactly.
That shift has to come through the mind first and then be executed again on an economic basis. So when we see our institutions on the same level mentally as others, then it'll happen. Remember, if Mormons don't go to BYU, it'll close down. If Catholics don't go to Catholic university, it'll shut down. So as historically black colleges and universities, if they continue to upgrade their infrastructure and build facilities that are comparable to their counterparts, you'll see more athletes trickle in, especially with the media exposure and the social and political climate of the current times.
And that's the key thing. And what's interesting is someone kind of threw out a comment to say, to the extent that is supporting HBCUs, is that becoming exclusionary? Well, you know what's interesting about HBCUs? Here's the thing about black people. Rip a page out of your book about black people. Seriously. We would never tell a white person they couldn't go to an HBCU because they do go. There are plenty of, not plenty, but there are a handful, because I want to like overstate it like there's tons, but there are white people who decide to go to HBCUs. One thing that black people have never done, even when they were being excluded, is they've never actually excluded other people and said, you don't belong.
Yeah, definitely. So in regards to that aspect, historically black colleges were founded for that specific purpose because we weren't allowed to go to other institutions. So if you look at from that, from that standpoint, then there's definitely a historical base and need for it. When you couple that with the fact that most of these historically black colleges, especially the Division I ones, are state-sponsored schools. Mm-hmm. State money that's given to these schools is not on the same par as their counterparts. So you can see a systematic way of keeping these schools down. I always like to tell people to look at the NFL draft when Walter Payton came out. Mm-hmm. I think it was the 1980 NFL draft. Out of the mm-hmm. first 10 players, it was like 7 of them from black schools. And Walter Payton, him and another teammate from Jackson State were drafted in the top 10. and that's like the last time you saw that. Steve McNair was a high draft pick from historically black college, but the 1980 NFL draft, out of the top 10, I believe 6 or 7 of them came from black colleges, a couple of them from teammates.
Here's what I would ask you as a person who is a sports historian. Speaking of, everyone tuned in, you're tuned into Sports 101 with Jamar Harp. I'm just a background person, kind of sharing some conversation, producing the show with him. Do you believe that that particular class, that large of a class of players coming out of historically black colleges, do you think at that point, let's say the NFL kind of turned around and people started paying closer attention to like, well, wait a minute. If that kind of talent can be there, maybe we should be recruiting those type of players that they're going after.
Definitely. A case in point, Grambling State University, where I started my coaching career and obtained my master's degree in sport administration. Shout out to that program. They had a rich history. Eddie Robinson, the most winningest coach in collegiate football, came from there. And there's so many stories, in particular after when USC beat Alabama in football, that you could go to Grambling and people will be on the sideline saying, oh, the team is so big. Everyone is 6'4" and 6'5". Line will come out. So going through their museum, which is on the first floor of the athletic facility, you see all the busts of the people that played not only in the NFL, but the Hall of Fame. So it was a good experience for me, a special experience to work in football games. I was a graduate assistant, so I spent my time in the press box, and I leave the press box to take some charted plays or script down to the field or locker room. You have to go past Doug Williams, Jake Reed, Sammy White, a host of other Grambling players that are not only historic on that level, but made a strong impact in the NFL as well. So it's just really a Sankofa moment where you go back to your roots. If you take the movie, Back to the Future, Marty McFly's current change when he in the past and changed some things and helped his family out. So we use that kind of same concept. We will be able to not only get our institutions on par with facilities, but get our players that were formerly excluded back to where they were always welcomed.
Well, I guess if there's no better time for now than change, because we have a lot of people's attention. A lot of people are focused on how change can happen. Jamar, I'm kind of under the impression that I don't feel enough people are asking for things. It's time to stop, saying, wow, like I love all of the social justice that we're seeing in sports. I mean, it's happening in places that, like, I'm a hockey person, and I'll be honest, the stance that the NHL took really kind of blew my mind. It's no longer taboo. You're hearing people say Black Lives Matter, and I kind of feel like I'm in a dream right now. I'm honest when I tell people this, because I'm trying to figure out. We've been saying this for years. We've been saying this for decades. We've been saying, seriously, for centuries. And it's interesting that all of a sudden now it resonates, but it's being embraced with almost every single sports group there is. This is a very historic moment that I'm assuming people must etch in their head. 2020 was not just the year of COVID, but it was the year that we think the country woke up, but we will not know how much the country, to me, is awoke, so to speak, until we see legitimate changes in economic disparities within certain communities. When I see that shift, Jamar, and I think athletes are in a key position, you can do all the PSAs about social injustice, but since you have the world's ear and eyes, how about you start giving some direction about how we can redirect resources to be the change that needs to happen?
Definitely. And in closing, I would just like to say that Maya is definitely correct. If you look at the athletic landscape, it's the young people are making a change. In any revolution, if you look at the civil rights movement, whether you agree or disagree with it, the young people were in charge of that. If you look at the French Revolution, when the Bastille was stormed, it was young peasants and farmers. So right now we have to keep the ear of our young people. And as Maya said, as the country is waking up, let's turn the light on brighter, pull the covers down, so they fully wake up and see that there is a disparity, not only in economics, but in social, living justice as well. So if we can continue to have our young people, our young athletes included, LeBron James, Chris Paul, a lot of people do a great job and just really tell our kids that it's nothing wrong with, playing for a great coach like Lavelle Moton that looks like you, or Sean Gilbert that looks like you. Two people that were great in their respective fields, football and basketball, have a lot of knowledge to impact on these young men outside of the game. So my closing message is let's keep turning this light on. Let's keep pulling these covers down and expose all these things. And instead of beating around the bush, I need this to have my program on the same par. I need this so I can have a campus that's on the same par. And then you can truly see diversity because you have two different things that are polar opposites and look the same.
There you go. If you don't ask, closed mouths don't get fed. Isn't that right?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So it's time to start asking people. All right, that's it for the first episode of Sports 101 with Jamar Harp and Maya Akai tagging along. We'll be back next Tuesday, 7 p.m. Central Time with more sports knowledge. Remember, it's about people, places, and things, not the X's and O's in sports. Until next time, everyone, enjoy your evening.
Good night, everyone.
See me. See me.
See me.
See my dark skin and my kinky hair.
See me.
Don't see past me.
Don't see through me.
See me.
See my tan skin and my curly hair.
See me.
Don't see past me.
Don't see through me.
See me.
See my face, wet with tears from years of oppression.
See my hands, weathered and worn from decades of pulling myself up through your society.
See my feet split from centuries of walking your delicate line.
See me.
See me.
See me.
I'm tired.
I'm tired.
I'm tired.